In 1981, a newly wedded husband and wife had just moved to Kyoto, Japan to start their new life as a married couple. The wife, Yoko Hata, had previously worked as an ink and paint girl for Osamu Tezuka's animation studio, Mushi Productions. But now that she was married, Japanese society dictated that she had to quit her job in order to become a loyal housewife for her new husband, Hideaki. While Yoko did quit her job, she soon found out that being a housewife left her with a surprising amount of free time on her hands. So, gathering up a couple of local neighborhood housewives who also had free time on their hands, she formed a small artist collective where they would paint cells for anime studios such as Tatsunoko Productions and Studio Pierrot. They would call themselves Kyoto Anime Studios. By 1985, the studio had brought in enough money that Yoko decided that it was time to turn this collective into a more serious venture. She and her husband turned the small, semi-professional crew into a full-blown limited liability company called Kyoto Animation, or KyoAni for short. Husband Hideaki was appointed president, but he was more of the business side if anything. Yoko, now vice president, would now oversee the day-to-day operations of the couple's new ventures. On any project going forward, Yoko would always have the final say. But more importantly, Yoko Hata was also instrumental in creating a work culture at Kyoto Animation that was unique for the industry both then and now. A culture based on constant open collaboration between staff, a workplace environment based on encouragement and nurturing talent, a production process that is handled with care and doesn't involve long strenuous hours and crunch, and equal opportunity between male and female staff members. Perhaps it was because of this positive work environment that Kyoto Animation became known in the 80s and 90s as the best studio for anime studios to outsource work to. Whether it was for key animation, in-betweens, or even just the occasional background art, Kyoto Animation's name often popped up in credits for works ranging from Gainax, Pierrot, and even Studio Ghibli. But things really kicked into high gear come the late 90s, when they helped Sunrise out of a jam by fully producing 33 episodes of their then hit anime, Inuyasha. That was a point where they went from just being an outsourcing studio to a deluxe outsourcing studio. All over Japan, anime studios were contracting KyoAni for production assistance. Even video game companies reached out to them to produce fully animated cutscenes. Their ability to produce high-quality work in a timely and inexpensive manner, thanks to the company's culture and location, was what made KyoAni so high in demand around the early 2000s. It also didn't hurt that they were also one of the earliest adopters of digital animation and were shown to be quite adept at it. And yet, despite having all the industry goodwill and nearly 2 decades worth in the business, they still hadn't produced a solo project. That changed in 2003 when the studio produced 2 projects independently. The first being the short OVA series Munto, and the second being the spin-off season to the Full Metal Panic series, Full Metal Panic from Mofu. A lot of people point to that as KyoAni's first real solo success, but it technically wasn't. Production difficulties necessitated them to outsource 4 of the episodes to their old friends at Tatsunoko. However, KyoAni would be far more prepared come the next year, with the success of Fumofu allowing them to start their own solo TV anime project. The question was, what was it gonna be? Tatsuya Ishihara, an animator who had been with the company since the 90s and had become one of its most prolific episode directors, pitched an idea to the higher-ups. It turns out that Ishihara was a huge fan of visual novels, and pushed hard for KyoAni's first true solo project towards being an adaptation of one of his favorites. And since visual novel adaptations were popular at the time, KyoAni decided that Ishihara's pitch was a safe bet. But little did they know that it was this particular visual novel adaptation that changed both the studio and the course of anime forever.
京都ビデオ
Yukito Kunisaki is a wayward vagabond in his late teens who travels from town to town across Japan making money as a magical puppeteer. Sadly, he's not very good at it. During a stop at the seaside town of Kame in the middle of summer, he ends up falling asleep on the seawall like the bum he is, and wakes up in the presence of a mysterious and flighty young girl who introduces herself as Misuzu Kamio.
なんだこいつ。
お一人ですか？暑いですね。
なんだ、何が目的だ。金か、金ならないぞ。
Already, Yukito gets strange vibes off Misuzu. She's constantly tripping over her own feet, her favorite drink is peach nectar, and she has an annoying habit of making dinosaur sounds whenever she gets upset.
Go, 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 go. その口癖やめって言うてるやろ。
Misuzu offers Yukito a place to stay, and being that he's dead broke and sleeping on the streets, he reluctantly agrees. While enjoying dinner, he ends up being acquainted with Misuzu's motorcycle riding and hard partying mom, Haruko. Haruko, naturally, is against having some freeloading homeless dude sleep under her roof rent-free, but is soon persuaded by Misuzu. But while Yukito can stay, Haruko gives him the condition that he must try to be Misuzu's friend. She confides in him that Misuzu is a very lonely girl because of her idiosyncratic nature, and that if Yukito at least pretends to be her friend, maybe she will start to act normal.
この子ちょっと危なっかしいとこあるやろ。そそっかしいしおもろいもん見たら鉄砲玉みたいに飛んでくし。
While Misuzu is in summer school, he runs across two other almost equally weird girls while wandering around town. Kana Kirishima, a cheerful tomboy who wears a bright yellow bandana around her wrist and is best friends with a local stray dog named Potato.
だってポテトがお人形をここまで持ってきちゃったって。君と遊びたかったみたい。ピコピコ。
言葉がわかるのか、そいつの。
親友だよ。ねえポテト。ピコピコ。
And Minagi Tono, the smart and seemingly refined girl who spends all day at an abandoned train station blowing bubbles with a feisty little kid named Michiru.
ねえねえ早くシャボン玉の続きしよう。今ねみちる絶好調なの。ねえその女の子妹さんですか？違うよ。みちるはみなぎの親友だよ。
But the more Yukito spends time with these three odd girls, he gets the feeling that all of them might be linked to the tragic legend of the cursed girl in the sky, a legend that Yukito has been secretly searching for his whole life at the urging of his long since passed mother. And he has a weird inkling that this summer is going to finally lead him to what he has been searching for.
それは俺にとって星の瞬きのように短く、そして永遠のように長い夏の始まりだった。
Historically speaking, the anime Air is the goose that laid the golden egg for Kyoto Animation. Premiering in the winter season of 2005, Air was noteworthy in that it was the best-selling anime of that year, complete #1 dominance, beating out titles such as Negima, Mushishi, and Eruka 7. And it was the runaway success of that anime that kicked off Kyoto Animation's period of dominance that lasted throughout the latter half of the 2000s. All of the hit anime they had as an animation studio in that decade can be traced back to the success of Air. You would think that such a historically important anime would be held in high regard by the anime fandom. And it was for a while. Being that the late 2000s was the time I was starting to dive deeper into anime, I remember Air being one of those KyoAni titles that was held aloft to such a height that some people considered it above criticism. And there was good reason for that. This was KyoAni's breakout anime after all. But as the 2010s rolled around, Air's relevance in the anime world started to get smaller. This is mostly because of KyoAni's ever-growing catalog overshadowing Air's success, specifically titles like Clannad, which some say did a concept similar to Air's, but far better thanks to it being on a grander scale. And if people do talk about it, it's mostly to point out how much of it is a product of its era, and how it brought forth the curse of the moe blobs to an unprecedented level that permeated anime for the next few years. But looking past all of that, all the dated character designs, all the moe bullshit, all the gaos, look past all of that, and you still find a great anime. Air being the best-selling anime in Japan certainly didn't come from nowhere. When you watch this anime, is it any wonder why Kyoto Animation became the powerhouse dynamo studio that it is today? They not only created an incredibly effective drama anime, but also completely reinvented the way visual novels are adapted into anime. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to reach in and drag the anime Air back into relevance and show the world why this integral part of Kyoto Animation's history is still worth revisiting today. We're going to do that, or we're going to die trying. Wish me luck. Air, as with many visual novel anime adaptations, began life as a visual novel. But Air didn't just come from any visual novel company, no sir. It came from the visual novel developer known as Key. Now Key, its history and its importance is so vast that it almost deserves its own video subject, so I'll be brief in describing them. Key was a company that was founded in 1998 by a small group of young staffers at other visual novel companies who desired more creative freedom. One of them was Jun Maeda, the main writer and soundtrack composer for Key. Maeda is considered to be the big pioneer of what is known as the Nakige subgenre of visual novels. Nakige visual novels are centered around emotionally heart-wrenching scenarios involving romance and tragedy, but often having a happy, if somewhat bittersweet, ending. And while games with similar elements did exist before, it was Key that perfected the genre, which in turn helped elevate the medium of visual novels from just being simple dating sims into the golden age that lasted through most of the 2000s. Key was just coming off the monster success of their debut title Canon and had immediately begun work on their second title. Amongst Japanese visual novel fans, Air was hyped up to the max. This was the follow-up to a game changer of a title and expectations were high. Key knew this and had used the money they made on Canon to hire more staff members, and Maeda definitely had more grander ambitions he wanted to realize in the making of Air. Maeda wanted to give players a chance to experience the entire story as one complete whole, rather than just having them piece it together through multiple routes and playthroughs as was the style at the time. So in the skin of what initially began as a typical dating sim with the player hanging out with 3 cute girls would eventually blossom into this dramatic tale filled with overlapping narrative themes and fully realized character arcs. Air was released on September 8th, 2000s as an adult-only game at first because even Maeda knew that sex sells. But later editions would excise the dirty bits in favor of additional story scenes. It even got ports on the Dreamcast and the PS2. Air was Japan's highest selling game of 2000, selling around 102,000 units. It just goes to show you that this wasn't just another visual novel adaptation. This was a highly anticipated title for Japanese audiences, to the point that teaser DVDs were released in the run-up to it in 2004. For their first true solo title, Kyoto Animation had a lot riding on this. While there's little doubt that they could pull it off today, if they had messed up in adapting this anime, it would easily have put a dent in the studio's future prospects. Toei Animation had already done an adaptation of Key's Canon back in 2002, and it was considered by many to be lackluster at best. But the difference there being Toei, one of the longest lived anime studios, can weather the storm of an overhyped anime turning out mediocre. A studio just breaking out of their status as an outsourcing venture has a lot more at stake. So now that we know where Air comes from, we need to quote a musty old Tumblr saying by asking ourselves, what is Air? We should start everything off by addressing the glassy-eyed elephant in the room. If people remember Air for one thing, it's the character designs, which are quite of their time, aren't they?
I've had a lot of years to get used to the fact that I was born with colorful features.
Yes, even I will admit that the designs have aged in a way that's less than satisfactory. It's easy to point out the incredibly disproportionate size ratio between the eyes and other facial features, and how said eyes are so spread far apart that it makes the characters look downright herbivorous. But rewatching this anime, I'm surprised nobody mentions how the highlights in the eyes all look distractingly blurry, as if they were added quickly using the Photoshop brush tool. And a side effect of every female character looking super cutesy, can you believe there's supposed to be a 20-year age difference between Misuzu and Haruko? If these designs have a culprit you can throw your pitchfork at, it would be Key co-founder and head visual designer Itaro Hinoi. Hinoi's reputation, especially amongst Western anime fans, is glaringly divisive. On one hand, she gave the Key visual novels their own distinct look, was very influential in how characters were designed for most of the 2000s, and is one of the most prominent women artists in the anime world. On the other hand, a lot of people point the finger at her for being the reason why non-anime fans think anime character designs are just a bunch of bug-eyed alien children. Not helped by Hinoi being very consistent and unapologetic in her style, to the point that she even pokes fun at it in her self-portrait where she's wearing a frog costume. So with adapting these Itaru-e designs, yes, there's an actual name for it, you have two choices. File down the stylization and make it look more palatable, or stay true to the source material and embrace stylism. And you can guess what KyoAni chose. But the designs do give Air an advantage by sticking in the mind a little more than it would have if it was just generic anime designs. Damning with faint praise, yes, but I think what alleviates some of the uncanniness of the designs is when you actually see them in motion. Tomoe Aratani, who adapted Hinoi's designs to anime, was also the head animation director for Air. Though she joined Kyoto Animation relatively late in their history, Aratani rose through the ranks very quickly, being the studio's first dedicated character designer, as well as being one of KyoAni's great mentors of animation direction. Aratani was a huge believer in studying the way the human form moves and extrapolating realistic body movements onto extremely stylized character models. There is so much thought put into how the characters move in this anime, whether it is to serve comedy like having Misuzu trip just be one frame of animation with no in-between, or to serve drama like having a character sprint into a run in slow motion. And even when the characters are standing still, the animators still put in the work. Shots that could have just been panning still frames are made visually interesting by having the anime's complete devotion to some of the most complex hair animations seen yet. This is all thanks to the work of Aratani's team, which had so many of KyoAni's best animation talent on it, with people such as studio veteran Yoshiji Kigami, who, like Aratani, strove to animate realistic body movements for dramatic effect. Satoshi Katawaki, who would later take what he learned at KyoAni and apply them to bigger projects. And the Ikeda sisters Kazumi and Shoko, two of KyoAni's most talented female staffers who were known for animating the little details. They may be the reason why the hair in this anime moves so well. While the character animation plays a huge role in making the dated character designs work, I feel like director Tatsuya Ishihara also deserves some credit in how he created the feel of Air. Air is a very cinematic anime, and I mean that in an almost literal sense. The way Ishihara and his other storyboarders, Yasuhiro Takamoto, Yutaka Yamamoto, and others boarded these scenes are right out of the movies. In scenes where a lesser anime would have just used simple brief cuts to hide the budgets, they can opt for a 15-second long take where you can just see a person walk into a room. They even make conversations between two characters interesting, not just by using interesting and sometimes intimate camera angles, but also putting those characters in visually stunning environments that were all brought to life thanks to digital technology. Air's digital art is the finest result of so much trial and error since the beginning of the decade. Utilizing atmospheric lighting with Joji Unoguchi's beautiful seaside backdrops creates a setting that feels truly immersive. You can feel the heat of the summer sun and the breeze of the nearby coastline just by looking at some of the shots. That is to say, it's not perfect. Some of the more ambitious shots that require digital assistance definitely show their age, just like the character designs. But even now, Air still has some beauty in it, and it shows the strength of KyoAni and how they were able to create such an organic, living, breathing world that could not have been done in the visual novel formats. And if you still have an issue with those character designs, just take it up with the two women who are hacking away in a male-dominated industry who made them. Anime like Air, whose crux rests on how well it can execute its dramatic moments, lives and dies by its voice acting. You have to be very careful when selecting to either watch it subbed or dubbed, because chances are you are going to get a different experience depending on which one you pick. But luckily, you don't have to worry about that going into Air, because both dub and sub are fairly equal in terms of quality. For the English dub, standout performances obviously include Monica Riel as Misuzu. While this is obviously a result of the persistent typecasting of her being the moe cutie, she really gives a lot of heart needed to play the role.
I had a dream again last night. It was a dream about flying. I've been going farther and farther back in time in my dreams lately. And last night when I was in the sky, I think that I was crying.
Lucy Christian does a very natural sounding Haruko by really bringing out her true hot mess self.
And then in the end, this is what the guy said to me. Listen, he said,
Well, hun, I guess maybe I was the one who fell in love with you. So at that point, I kind of figured that I'd already won. And I says to him, you just threw back a mermaid, baby.
Stephanie Whittle's Kano really nails the energetic tomboy aspect of her character in helping her feel more distinct from the other two girls.
You have to hear it, because if you don't listen, it's gonna claw its way out of my belly and turn into a monster so ginormous no one in the world will be able to defeat it and all of humanity will be doomed!
And I can't forget my girl Tiffany Grant for delivering the finest performance of her career as Potato the dog.
Pika, pika, pika!
All that being said, it's not a perfect dub. There are some performances that you can either take or leave. One example being Serena Vargas as Michiru, which definitely has the perfect amount of energy put into the performance, but does so with a voice that sounds both too cartoony and about 5 years too old for the character.
I know your type! This guy's just a pervert who likes kidnapping young girls for kicks! I feel so included right now.
I also gotta question ADV for the guy they hired to perform Yukito. It's not a bad performance per se, but I just question the idea of giving the role to someone who has neither a name nor a face to speak of. I don't know, it just feels kind of weird as all. But even as a dub apologist, I actually do prefer the subbed version of this anime. This could be because of performances that are also standouts, such as Ryoka Yuzuki's Minagi, which is the definition of soothing.
素晴らしい特技をお持ちなんですね。国崎さんは拍手パチパチパチ。
But in my opinion, it's all thanks to the performances of the two main leads. Yukito is voiced by none other than the world-famous Daisuke Ono.
ラーメンセットが是が非でも食いたいんだ。だが残念ながら金がない。そこでだ。さあ、楽しい人形劇の始まりだ。お題は見てのお帰りだぞ。
While he's known today for voicing so many baritone-throated heroes, back in 2005, he was a relative nobody, only having bit parts and various crowd noises on his resume then. But Yukito ended up being not only his first main role, but his breakout role. Ono's rough, deep voice really adds on that feral edge that is essential to Yukito's character. Like you really buy that this is the type of guy who would get in a fistfight with an 8-year-old.
国崎ゆきと
おう。
お前はどっか行っちゃえべー。
何を。
But when he has to dial it back for when things get more serious, Ono really delivers a heartfelt performance that goes above and beyond in separating Yukito from just being another visual novel protagonist. But of course, the standout role out of all of them goes to the late Tomoko Kawakami as Misuzu. Now at first glance, you would think that KyoAni could just as well have hired any seiyuu who make their bread and butter on voicing marketable moe characters. But if you know what kind of roles Kawakami is mostly known for, you realize that this was a daring casting choice. Kawakami was mostly known for voicing big sisterly heroines with iron wills and fierce attitudes. In fact, one of her most famous roles was a male shonen protagonist. As far as voicing a ditzy little cutie like Misuzu, you would think that Kawakami would be low on the list. And yet...
わあ、また換気扇からセミが。わあ、醤油差しが倒れた。わあ、サラダ油がこぼれた。わあ、ゆきとさんのベーコンエッグがとんでもないことに。
おい、ミスズ。
私勝った。
She's surprisingly good at acting cute and not having it come off as forced. What could have been just a simple moe performance ends up having a more human quality thanks to Kawakami's acting. But when things get sad, that's when Kawakami really shines as Misuzu and delivers a performance that is downright heart-wrenching.
お前泣いてるのか。
泣いてないよ。遊べる。頑張らないと。頑張らないと。
どうしたんだ。具合でも悪いのか。
大丈夫。大丈夫。
And even when she has to be calm and understated during dramatic moments, Kawakami affects a tone to Misuzu's voice that makes her internal pain and turmoil palpable.
だから何も言わない。私本当に邪魔者だから、これ以上迷惑かけないようにいつも一人で遊んでるの。変なジュース探したりトランプしたりして。
It's because of Kawakami's performance as Misuzu that all of the dramatic beats in her story just seem to work, and it serves as a testament to what we lost in the wake of her premature death almost 10 years ago. But while the animation and performances are major reasons as to why Air succeeds as a drama, what really made it flourish was how the anime told the story it was adapting. I have memories of that period when Air was getting lavished with praise, and at one point I remember that a lot of praise was being leveled at KyoAni for how they adapted the game, particularly because of how well they were able to do it in just 12 episodes. Because they were still considered a novice studio by the networks at the time, KyoAni could only get 12 episodes ordered. Scriptwriter and series composition director Fumihiko Shimo knew he only had a limited frame to which he could tell the tale of Air. As a result, when watching Air, you notice not a single scene is wasted. The show is remarkably paced, with every subplot laid out neatly to be solved in a 2 to 3 episode period, while still weaving the main plot into them as an ongoing process. There is not a single loose end left by the time the anime is over with. This restrictive episode order could have also been a factor in how Kyoto Animation made the approach of fully embracing the source material and the very novel-esque way it tells its story, which I guess could explain why there are a couple of lines from characters that feel very, for lack of a better term, writerly.
だから砂浜で遊ぶの、かけっこしたり、水の掛け合いしたり、そして最後にまた明日ってお別れするんです。
それってまるで友達じゃないか。
そう、友達。
But by staying true to the story and its themes, Air is almost forcing me to talk about its plot in detail and its various twists if I want to explain why the story works. So yeah, this is the spoiler part of the video. Exit to the left if you haven't seen this anime already. Air's devotion to the source material allows a lot of the drama of the visual novel to fully be realized and come to life. It also ends up exposing a few flaws in the original's narrative, namely Kano's subplots, which is by far the weakest part of the story. While it does build on a lot of the relationship between her and her older sister Hijiri, and does give Yukito impetus for giving the audience more information on what exactly the girl in the sky he's searching for is, it mostly seems to serve as a way to introduce the magical realism elements of the story and to make Kano a red herring. You see, in the beginning, there's kind of a mystery of, well, either one of these three girls could be linked to the girl in the sky, and you're kind of left to wonder who. But after it's revealed that Kano's link is tertiary as best, and her weird behavior is mostly due to her being possessed by the spirit of a mother forced to kill her child, that element gets dropped quickly. On the flip side, Minagi's subplot with Michiru is amazing. It's a subplot that has lots of twists and turns on top of each other, but they don't feel absurd because they add so much depth to the story. Michiru being a spirit to replace Minagi's younger sister who was stillborn is already a good enough plot twist, but when you add Minagi's mother thinking Minagi is the sister who died, and that Minagi is able to break her delusion by both confronting her outright and introducing her to Michiru, that is just an example of how to effectively plot out dramatic moments, especially when the subplot ends on a wonderful tearjerker of a scene with Michiru, having finally fulfilled her purpose, about to cease existing, and she and Minagi are able to have a tearful goodbye with their backs turned towards one another just so they can keep talking.
別れは辛くない。辛くない。だって笑ってるもん。ずっと笑い続けて、世界がたくさんの笑顔でいっぱいになって、みんながあったかくなって生きていけたらいいね。みなぎ、みちる、バイバイ。
But as all of these subplots are going, the main plot between Yukito and Misuzu is still ongoing. As the anime goes on, Yukito and Misuzu start to become a lot closer, with Yukito starting to actually see Misuzu as an actual friend, maybe even more than just friends. But after one night where Misuzu has a physical and mental breakdown, Yukito learns from Haruko that Misuzu is a very sickly child who has these breakdowns every time she gets close to someone.
あの子、小さい頃からずっとなんや。誰かと友達になれそうになったらああなるねん。
友達になれそうになると。
あんたやったら一緒におっても平気か思って期待してたんやけどな。うちとおるときは大丈夫なんやけどな。
Yukito also learns from Misuzu the next day that Haruko isn't even really her mother, and is really her aunt that acts like a foster mother.
春子さんは本当は私のおばさん。私が変な子だから押し付けられたの。春子さんは嫌がったんだけど、 結局私はここで暮らすことになった。
Yukito tries to limit his distance from Misuzu while still being able to see her, but after coming home to see her collapse on the ground, he decides to leave town for her own safety. After a series of flashbacks where we learn what Yukito's mother meant about the girl in the sky, we learn that Misuzu is in fact the reincarnated spirit of that girl, and that once she dreams her final dream, she and the person closest to her will die.
その子をどうしても助けてあげたいと思ったら、人形に心を込めなさい。私はあなたと共にあるから。
人形に心を込める。
Yukito comes to the decision to go back to Misuzu and stay by her side to see if he can break the curse, even if he knows the consequences. But all of a sudden, he disappears and Misuzu wakes up feeling better. And this is where the story gets interesting. Up until this point, you've kind of been led to believe that this is a love story between Yukito and Misuzu, and while it can be seen as a romance, albeit a very chaste one, the romantic elements are revealed to be not at all important in the grand scheme of things. Because as we'll see in the next couple of episodes, Air isn't a story about romantic love. We get a flashback to where we see how the curse came true with a story about a girl with wings named Kana. And I do have to give points to Cynthia Martinez in the dub for making this princess-like figure sound hilariously unprincess-like.
So is that it? Is that what a family is like?
It's difficult to describe, but it's something like this.
Hey, stop sitting so close to me! What do you think you're doing?
The story is about Kana, her bodyguard, and her lady-in-waiting traveling across Japan to free Kana's mother from a Buddhist sect. And while they are initially successful, Kana's mother ends up killed, and Kana herself tries to escape but is cursed by the group of monks and is killed as well. And if there's one part where the short length of Air really hurts the story, it's this part. Considering that they have about a quarter of an episode to explain the finer details of the curse and what it exactly means, you have to be paying very close attention, otherwise you'll miss something important.
それは欲人に心を寄せる者をも弱らせ、やがて死に至らしめます。
俺の傷が癒えぬのもそのためか。俺はいつ死ぬんだ。
今より人とせは持つまいと。
そうか。
After we cut back to the present, we get a retelling of the events with Misuzu from the last episodes, told from the point of view of a crow that turns out to hold the spirit of Yukito. A twist that's expertly telegraphed by the events not showing Yukito's face. And when Yukito reveals himself to Misuzu as the spirit who will watch over her, it does provide a sense of closure to the romantic aspect of their relationship.
ここにも行ったら嫌だよ。嫌だよ。
ずっとそばにいる。絶対に忘れない。俺はお前と一緒にいる。
And it's good that it does because it paves the road for the actual main theme of Air. As it turns out, romantic love isn't strong enough to break a curse. But what is a theme the anime has been hinting at throughout its entire run. From Kano being possessed by the spirit of a mother, to Minagi's reconciliation with her mother, to Yukito being motivated by his mother's last words, to Kana being motivated by her want to actually see her mother, all of the events are connected by Air's main theme: motherly love. This is where the anime switches protagonist to an unexpected third main player in the story, Haruko. Haruko really emerges as the most compelling character in Air for the last couple of episodes. It's rare to see an anime spend so much time with a parental figure, really digging into their conflicts and struggles, especially one who isn't related by blood. Haruko's neglectful lush act is really more of a shield. Misuzu was a child born out of wedlock that was dumped on her aunt's doorstep after her mother died. Being that she was completely unprepared to raise a child, especially one as sickly as Misuzu, Haruko feels content in just doing the bare minimum as a parent, a trait that's justified by Misuzu's condition.
うちとあの子の気持ちは離れとった。せやから一緒に暮らせるんや。親子ってなんやろな。うちはほんまの親やないからようわからん。まず、外れやったわ。
At the same time, Haruko does have this hidden want to be a good mother to Misuzu, but she honestly feels like it's too late to start being one.
それでもうちはあの子の親やあらへんのや。今日にもあの男が連れに来るかもしれへん。そしたらうちは嫌でも一人の生活に戻ってまう。その時にできるだけ惨めにならへんよう、うちはうちの生き方を守ることしかできへんかった。
That begins the change. Once Misuzu realizes that Yukito's love wasn't strong enough to break the curse fully, she winds up getting sicker. And it's at this point where Haruko slowly but surely begins to become a better mother figure for her. But one day, after accidentally cutting Misuzu's hair to the length she had as a child, Misuzu completely loses the ability to walk and regresses back to childhood.
ママ
そうや、うちや。
ママはどこに行っちゃった？
そないなこと思い出さんで。うちが代わりのお母さんやで。
And at the worst time because Misuzu's blood father wants to take custody of her and place her in a special home. But after Haruko makes a deal with him that she can actually be a mother to her, he gives her 3 days to show that she can take care of Misuzu. This plot is ultimately what makes Air unique. In place of a story between a boy and a girl trying to build a romance with each other, we have a story of a mother trying to build a strong, caring relationship with her foster daughter. And it's way more interesting because you get to see Haruko's earnest attempts at being a mother, while also seeing her relapse into her bad habits at the worst time, showing how she still has a long way to go towards being a mother figure. This whole episode is a showcase of Haruko's love mixed with her desperation and self-doubt. It even ends like how this kind of plotline would end in a key drama, where the two leads have an emotional reunion, only this time instead of two high schoolers, it's Misuzu and Haruko finally realizing their true relationship as mother and daughter. But if Air was known for anything back in the day, it was for its ending. And for those of you who still haven't seen this anime and failed to heed my warning at the start, this is the mother of all spoilers here. Misuzu dies. Now, a lot of people really love this ending because it's the tear-jerking ending that brings it all home, but others have criticized this ending for being, quote, emotionally manipulative. Now, while I believe that media does have the power to emotionally manipulate people, the kind of criticism when leveled against these type of scenes does cause me to give the side eyes to those who make it. It's like you're saying that I didn't like that this anime made me feel something. And it's not like this moment comes out of nowhere. It's actually built up quite well. Misuzu tells Haruko the pain of the curse is over, but that was just a lie to get Haruko to stop worrying about her too much, and the curse is stronger than ever. When Misuzu wakes up the next morning, she tells Haruko that she's had her last dream. Already, this is setting up that Misuzu is about to die, but she doesn't appear to seem worried. In fact, she almost feels happy. This is important when you realize that the curse dictates that the person closest to Misuzu will also die along with her, and that in this point in the anime, the relationship between Misuzu and Haruko is at their strongest. And then it finally reaches the emotional climax of the anime, when Misuzu gets out of her wheelchair and begins to walk towards Haruko, fessing up that the curse is still here and that she's about to die from it. But she wants to die happy in her mother's arms, and that is her goal. It's a great tear-jerking moment with Misuzu's calm acceptance being offset by Haruko's tearful denial as she just now realized that she would have made a great mother, all made sadder by Aya Hisakawa's excellent performance.
生きるじゃなかったから。だからね。もうゴールするね。
あかん、これからや言うてるやろ。
It's a tragic ending, but ultimately, it's a happy one. We see that it was only Misuzu who died, and not Haruko, already showing that the curse may have been broken. But we don't get confirmation until the final scene, where after a quick epilogue, we see two children playing on the beach who are implied to be the reincarnated spirits of Misuzu and Yukito. And the final shot of the anime is of them holding hands, all but saying that the curse has finally been lifted. So, I guess this ending could have been seen as emotionally manipulative. If you consider an anime with great boarding, effective voice acting, and the proper build up to an emotionally resonant climax that makes sense within the context of the story, emotionally manipulative. And even upon rewatch when I was doing my best to view it with a more critical eye, this ending still got to me after all these years. I guess that really is a testament to how well Kyoto Animation adapted the source material. And if that hasn't convinced you yet, just take a look at the other Air adaptation. Released the same year as the TV anime, Air the Motion Picture is almost the diametric opposite of Air the series. Instead of being produced by a scrappy underdog studio hoping for a breakout hit, it was produced by Toei, the oldest studio in the industry. Instead of making the character designs stay true to the unique art style of Itaro Hinoi's character designs, they opt for a more standard style. Instead of being the directorial debut of newcomer Tatsuya Ishihara, it was instead headed up by one of the most established anime directors in the game, Osamu Dezaki. But when comparing the two, the differences are far more stark, and it shows what kind of anime Air would be if put in the hands of people who didn't handle the story with care. The setting doesn't feel as immersive as the series, and despite having Dezaki and his flares as the director added to this anime, you get the feeling that his heart truly isn't into the story, and he mostly just feels like a gun for hire. Plus, criticize KyoAni's designs all you want, they still gave the anime a sense of identity, something that appears to be lacking in the movie. But the most egregious difference being that Air the Motion Picture makes the decision to completely focus on the love story between Yukito and Misuzu, and it causes the emotional core of Air to suffer. The main twist of Air is that it's a mother's love, not romantic love, that's strong enough to break the curse. But Air the Motion Picture wants to have it both ways by having Yukito and Haruko having to share their affection for Misuzu and implying that both of their love is needed to break the curse. And the final scene of Misuzu dying in her mother's arms, which is so effective because it's a personal moment between a mother and a daughter. Yeah, let's just have Yukito be there as well and water down the emotionality of the whole story. Without wanting to do so, Toei ended up creating a meta-narrative about the old guard changing with the new. To Toei, Air was just another lovey-dovey visual novel that they wanted to cash in on to get money from lonely otaku. But to Kyoto Animation, Air was a story that needed to be told. The reason Kyoto Animation was praised so highly for their work on Air was because they approached it like a true fan of the source material would, knowing what makes the story work from an emotional standpoint and giving that story to a group of writers, animators, and directors who you know will do it justice. They didn't seek out just to adapt the story, but to elevate it, giving it smooth character animation, cinematically storyboarded scenes, heartfelt voice acting, beautiful backdrops, and a story that hits all the necessary beats needed to wring out every bit of emotion from the audience. Air is evidence that Kyoto Animation was always going to be destined to do great things, because of how the studio nurtured their talent and instilled in them a true love for the medium of animation. It's also evidence that such talent is not easily replaceable. By the time this video goes up, a year will have passed since the pointless arson attack on Kyoto Animation Studio 1, in which 36 people were killed. Some of them were people who had been with the studio for a long time, and were one of the people who had helped bring the anime Air to life. People who still had a lot more contributions to give to future anime projects. Contributions that, sadly, we'll never see. Air is not a perfect anime. It's obvious why it has been overshadowed by Kyoto Animation's other works in some cases, but it's still a great anime, an important anime. It's no coincidence why Kyoto Animation is still considered to be the best in the anime business for 15 years now. So here's to the anime that made that studio what it is today. Thank you for still being an amazing anime after all these years, Air. And stay strong, Kyoto Animation. Stay strong forever.
またいつか会えたらええな。ほな、元気でやりや。